thing is, it's a bit hard to see people because you're in the lights, but...
Maybe that I can do that. Let's see if that actually works. Yeah, I can see that better when you can from up there.
And the main thing is how you end the questions, if there are questions. That's the, because the person up there may not want to.
You have to be strong.
Yeah.
Person to cut off.
But if
If it's
you
too long,
do a question,
or if they keep on going on.
Or if there are talk about this machine as my output to actually run the numbers and it's not. Don't ask that question. It's not.
Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first of the parallel sessions of the conference. This is the first of three sessions which are rather bluntly named Who Cares? They're looking at user-related issues, so the perspective of the users of the services that research networking provides. There are three presenters in this afternoon's session. I suspect that all three of them may be quite well known to many of you, but I will give a brief introduction of each of them. The first of our speakers is Michael Nolan, who until recently was the Director of the Information Systems Services at Trinity College in Dublin, in Ireland. He's now working as an independent consultant, very much still up to date and in touch with the area that we all work in. And he's going to give you a presentation this afternoon looking at campus issues of research networking, which he's very, very well placed, of course, to comment on. So, Michael.
Thanks very much for that, Dale, and good afternoon, everybody. And the slides will come up now, magically. Right. Okay. All right. To an extent, what I'm talking about this afternoon, there's a great tie-in with what Paul van Binst has just been talking, and will actually follow through as a theme for the rest of the afternoon, I think. So we start off with the network manager's dilemma. We have this problem in providing service. Our task is to provide access to networking. That's basically what our mission is. We have to do it in a secure manner, and these things do not necessarily go hand in hand. So access and security can often be actually they're a counter force. Today, I'll claim we're also forced with competition in that it used to be the only show in town, the NREN, the campus network. It isn't today. And the other problem or feature that we're facing is that all our users are networking specialists. They're all experts. Just as everyone is an IT expert, all the users now are networking experts, which makes the job of the network manager difficult. So, looking at some background, the background to this talk is the Earnest study. You've heard mention of the Earnest study already. Paul mentioned it, and everyone has actually got a copy of the Earnest report, of the summary Earnest report in their pack. So there's a wealth of interesting information in that. Okay, I'm adding my experiences and observations along with some blue sky brainstorming. But the basis of this talk is the work that went on last year in the Earnest, and in particular in the campus networks subgroup. So if we look at sort of going back to first principles, we look at what is the purpose of a campus network and who is it for? Too often, people will regard the network as a showcase. It is a network for the networkers. They like a network. Users get in the way and mostly interfere when they use the network. So we start off with my thesis that the network is for the user, and that's what the network's about. Again, Paul mentioned changing technologies and changing pace of technology in general. Technology is getting faster. It's getting faster exponentially. And it has always been, and people say it can never continue, but we've just got to look around ourselves, and yes, it is getting faster. So we've got fast-changing back-end technologies, from little MGS routers, up to that can route tiny amounts of data up to multi-gigabit networks that are available today. But one of the areas that is changing even faster than the back-end technology, and in the back-end technology I'm also talking about the fibers, as we get denser and denser connectivity. Talking about consumer technology is changing even faster. Paul Van Bintz talks about the number of mobile phones, the number of televisions. It's just growing and growing and growing, and the number of technologies are growing. The NREN, people may not like this, but networks are getting faster and they're also getting cheaper. And the users are more and more educated on the possibilities of using the network. Okay, hopping around, we live in a mobile world. What do you say, 3 million mobile phones? But also traditional laptops. I'm not sure whether there's anyone in the room without a laptop. There may well be, and I'm fairly sure if I asked around there isn't anyone in the room without a mobile phone. I actually met a software developer last week whose claim to fame was that he didn't have a mobile phone. But they're going away. It's going away from just mobile phones. We're now seeing smartphones, phones that can be our network connectivity as well. We've moved through PDAs, and now we're going to MP3 players. But this is an iPod, but everyone think an iPod. It's an MP3 player, but no, it gives wireless connectivity. It gives Wi-Fi. I can read my email as I wander through Bruges, and the good citizens of Bruges give me free Wi-Fi access by not having secure networks. But it's available. I've got full web browsing facility, full email facility from a tiny device like that. And who knows what they'll bring out next year. If we're looking at ultralight PCs, the Asus EEE, €450 for a fully functional laptop. HP have also announced a similar one, Sony, and the MIT-sponsored OLPC. And somebody else has come out with one that I mentioned. Oh, of course, the Apple MacBook Air. I'd love to show you one, but I don't have one. So there's a wealth of them. Now, unfortunately, the MacBook Air is in a considerably different bracket to the Asus E. But they're coming out with things like without hard disks, it's flash memory. Anyway, everyone in this room and everyone in our environment has these things. And I actually think that the people in this room and at this conference are actually the leaders of the world. What we do and what we see here today, ordinary users and ordinary citizens will be doing in the close future. So that's one side of the world, is the mobility and the always-on world we live in. Unfortunately, we live in another world as well, and we live in a regulatory environment. We live in a controlled environment which has laws. We all have acceptable use policies on the network. I actually read the one that when I got on the wireless network this morning, I suspect most people click accept and go on, but it is irregular. We are governed by that as we're here. We're governed by the rules of Bellnet. We have copyright laws. People can't just do anything. Data protection, freedom of information, defamation and free speech, incitement to hatred and child pornography. This is the world we live in, and it's part of the network manager's dilemma, is that they've got to protect against all of these things, or provide for all of these things, as opposed to the user on a telecoms network at home, where they are bound by them, but they don't necessarily know that they're bound by them. All right, one of the things that I'm getting behind my slides. One of the things that the Earnest campus report does is that it categorizes the users very, very neatly, and they're A, B, and C. So the Class A user, and you don't really need to read it because it gets dense when we get to B and C, but the Class A user is 80% of our users are Class A. They're their regular web browser. They're probably what most people are doing around the room now.
but that's 80% of our users. Class B then add a bit more. They add some grid access. This is a direct lift from the Earnest report. So those are 15% of the users, and we've got to do, we've got to pay more attention to them, but they're a smaller number. Now, when we get to the Class C users, they are the very heavy users with extremely large amounts of data, maybe for short periods, but when Paul Van Spins talks about the over-provisioning of the network, we've got to do it for these people. That's what the over-provisioning is for. And it's estimated that those are 5%, and that neatly adds up to 100%. But the fact is that people migrate from A to B to C. I'm sure some people here are Class C users back in their own institution. But certainly, well, every Class A user will be a B user and possibly a C user. And over time, we will see the tasks that C users migrate down the line to B and A. All right, here's a photograph that was picked up in a European university. It's an English-speaking country, I guess. I hope nobody recognises it as theirs. But I just think that this sort of photograph is quite shocking. The network is there for the network, for the computer centre. And certainly my thesis will be we should turn that round and say everything is allowed until we find a good reason not to do it. I mean, we're too busy banning things like Skype and BitTorrent from the network for no really good reason. If we find that there's a good reason to do it, and I can remember people banning Napster in the past, there was probably a very good reason because it didn't have any real use, whereas banning BitTorrent today is totally counterproductive. All right, moving to services on the network. I'm sort of moving up the stack now. I'd like to look at services as a sliding window. So, you slide the window across. And some services come in on one side and other ones are dropped out on the other side, or they should be. And in that we look at hardware and we have reasonable review processes for hardware, we need to do that for software. So we need a decent life cycle review. So new services come in at one side and a commensurate number should be dropped out at the far side. And I'm saying that they need to be either dropped or outsourced. And many times you can outsource things to service providers who are actually going to do it better than you could do it. But you've always been doing it. I mean, when you question why are we doing something, the answer is we've always been doing it. And it's not necessarily a good answer. And sometimes, or very often, services that have been built up and developed and being universities and research institutions, of course we're developing new services. We need to say at a certain stage, these would be better done outside, and there are more exciting things at the other side of that window that we need to start bringing in. All right, so question, and this is a question for all our institutions. Why are we providing email for students? I sort of get the feeling today that students pop out of the womb with an email address, but certainly they arrive in our institution with an email address and an email service that they like and use. And many institutions force them to use something else that they just don't want to do. And email has been around for, I don't know, a lot of years. And I don't think there's any good reason for it. Spam and virus filtering. Many institutions are spending vast amounts of time and effort keeping these up to date. It can all be done commercially. Storage for students. Storage for mobile workers. You're probably carrying your data around with you now, but the data can be in the sky and you can get it wherever you are. You can go down to one of the machines in the cyber cafe and get at your data if it was organized properly. And this is all available. Campus telephones. How many times do you go into an office and you find 3 or 4 telephones lying around the place? Going even further than data centres. Probably every institution is building data centres, yet 20 kilometres out of town is an enormous data centre that is highly provisioned in terms of power, energy recycling, backup power and data. And yet we go and build them. And the network managers won't like me for this, but why are we providing a network for our Class A users? And I'm saying that legacy services such as email or other services I mentioned can be quite expensive. Expensive in terms of mostly staff time and general resources. So if we look at Class A users, the trend, and it's emphasised by the people here, is that people are moving to laptops. It used to be your desktop was stuck there and it never moved. Now you've got a laptop and it's... Sorry, that's my phone, probably. Can you turn? Right beside the microphone, I'm sorry. Everyone is mobile. It's not just people here are mobile, but people go home. Well, some people go home. I don't know whether network engineers go home. But people go home at night and they take the laptop with them. And what do they have to do? They have to reconfigure it. So now my question is to everyone in the room to honestly put up your hand if you had to modify your computer since you left home. I mean, and unfortunately I did. Modify in any way. I don't believe you. Okay, I actually don't believe you, sorry. If the number of people that didn't have to modify their computer in any way to get it going here, you must have the panacea that I'd like for users. But most people have to fiddle with it somehow when they move between work and home and a Torino conference in Bruges. So, one of the solutions to avoid that is to bring your network with you. And everywhere we go, there are mobile networks. You fly into a country, you turn on your phone, you usually don't have to reconfigure your phone, and you get connected back to a network. So the GSM, whether it be 2, 3, 2.5, they are ubiquitous across our world. And everyone uses the mobile for telephony. All right, so currently 3G is only 3 point something megabits, but it's moving up. And we're moving towards 4G networks and LTE, where they're talking about 40 megabits. I said 40 gigabits to someone yesterday. 40 megabits. So I'm suggesting that we need to move our Class A. We need to move our Class A users to a mobile service, such as a mobile broadband. This sort of box. This particular one actually costs €240 a year to run. And while I say there's a problem with roaming, for 12 countries in the world, there's free roaming from this particular company. In my previous position, we looked at the costs of networking, of network points, wired network points, and they were in excess of €100 a year for each network point. I don't know, but the disparity between €100 a year and €250 a year is not enormous. All right, if you scale it by 10,000 networks, the gap is quite big, but it's getting there. And all I can say is that this sort of thing will get cheaper. And the competition on the campus network will increase. So, outsource most of the network. We heard earlier about doing away with NRENs, and it is a valid question to ask. For the users, the WAN is already outsourced. 20 years ago, if you went around this room, you'd probably get half a dozen people who would say, yes, I have a dedicated network link to the States or somewhere else to provide my WAN. Of course, all that's gone, and the NRENs are doing a good job for us. Today, many services are also outsourced within our institutions. You know, we've looked at the sliding window. So people used to use soldering irons to repair PCs. Some people have an outsourced help desk going 24/7, follow the sun around the world. commodity software services, these sort of things have already been successfully outsourced. So, get rid of the low-end users. Sorry, get rid of them. Provide them with a much better service and greater mobility. And what that will allow us to do is concentrate on our high-end users, the people that really do need our help. We have, by outsourcing the Class A people, we've removed their support problems largely because of all this messing that I claim they do to configure the machine as they move backwards and forwards. All right. I mean, it is possible that Class B can be outsourced as well, but largely it would be the low-end people, so that we can do the main work for the high-end users, the research users, the people that actually bring in the big money. So, okay. There are a couple of interim moves before we move to that stage, and that is put in extra hardware and stop or eliminate the useless work that people are doing, trying to maintain boxes. So I'm saying that network access control, DNS, these can all be put in so-called hardware at the moment. Migrate from homegrown systems, standardize management across the institution, and ensure, and this comes to firewalls as well, ensure that existing hardware is not limiting the network performance. Too often you see that the firewall is running at a high percentage and it's actually blocking the services. All right, I'm going to have to move on. Institutional network policy, we'll come to that on the Earnest report. We need strong institutional policies agreed at a high level, way beyond the IT department or the network department. And it goes beyond simple hardware implemented policies. And these network policies need to be enforced and communicated to the user. So, moving beyond the institution, there is a requirement for identity management, and identity management going far beyond what is proposed in the current European federations. Because what I think that the existing systems aren't taking account of is that there are multiple domains of responsibility in any one institution. There is not just one. So what we need is a federation of federations. I want to come here and have all my access rights transferred with me. So I just fire up the computer and get all my access rights back here. Eduroam is a step, but it's only a little step. Federations. And the whole of the Commission's education policy at the moment is roaming around Europe, mobility for staff and students, and our students are going from university to university, and inevitably they fall foul of the network and have to reconfigure when they get there. This is just to show the complexity of the network. It's not simple. So you've got LANs, MANs, regional networks, national networks, and then on into géant and the internet. Life is complex. So coming now back to the Earnest recommendations, which are in the Earnest report. There are two sets of them, for institutions mostly and for NRENs. And I've totally lifted the recommendations, so I'm just going to go to the heading of the thing, and there's a lot of words down there. Networking policy, I hit on before, needs strong policy. Infrastructure, just go through. Oh, back. Keep the infrastructure up to date. Make sure that the infrastructure isn't slowing things down. In the Earnest study, they found that individual departments had different replacement policies for equipment, and they were slowing end to end. So you need to set an institution-wide policy for hardware replacement and network equipment replacement, and provide the support. Security, more or less what I said. Establish independent security teams within the institution. All right, education of the end user. Again, it's back to the acceptable use policies, but keep people informed and have them part of the team building the policies. Collaboration. Again, it's strong, formalised arrangements both between the NRENs and any of the intermediate networks. And obvious, encourage people to share their experience. Awareness, education. There was a whole section of this report comes about education. All right. There are also a few recommendations to NRENs that I am going to have to flick over, but again, it's education and collaboration. So, in summary, the pace of technology change is accelerating. The current wave of technology is consumer-led. Everyone on the campus and everyone involved in campus network needs to be agile in adopting or adapting to the new trends. And we need to look to the unique users and for these new network services. And in fact, we look to our users to find out what we should be providing as network providers. And that is the URL for all of the campus, or of all of the earnest reports, the breakdowns that is summarised in the summary report, but it does have the campus networking, and I strongly recommend you to read it. There's a wealth of valuable information in it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Are there any questions here? Okay, there's one here in the middle. Microphone's just coming. Can you introduce yourself as well before you ask the question, please?
My name is Thomas Schmidt from Hamburg University. Michael, I have a question. You mentioned, like, when facing at get rid of the Class A users, you mentioned the problem configuring your PC on the one hand and the ease of using star G networks. Behind this, like the 3G or so, behind this is actually a different paradigm. The operator-controlled end system and the user-controlled end system. The PC is user-controlled. That was a revolution of some years ago. In the moment, actually, the battle is going on. Who keeps the control of the end systems in the mobile networks? And actually, the Googles and the Skypes are fighting exactly in the opposite direction as you're proposing. They actually want to move end system control away from the operators, and I believe most of the people here want to do this as well. So isn't there a contradiction in the view you presented?
Yes, but I took as my theme of the talk to ask questions, not to provide answers. And I mean, I quite honestly, to start people thinking, at least to consider the different paradigms, as you say, Thomas. But I don't know the answer. I mean, so.
This is just a comment. Michael said you can find the report on the Terena website. This is quite correct, of course. But actually, if you want a printed copy of the Earnest Campus issue sub-study, it's up in the lunchroom.
Okay. So pick one up.
Are there any other questions?
Tomasz Wolniewicz from University of Toruń in Poland. You mentioned taking the A users out of the network into, say, mobile operators. On the other hand, you mentioned eduroam as not going far enough, whereas eduroam was mostly, I think, built for those A users for the ease of accessing the network anywhere. But if they are moved to the mobile operators, like you said, then eduroam has really no place for them. So just leaving eduroam for Class B and C users is probably not enough. And just one more question. Do you think mobile networks would actually work in this situation here if we all connected to one operator and run our laptops off it?
No, and you know, when I'm proposing, say, the mobile broadband solution, there are loads of problems, yes. But I can believe that next year or the year after, yes, it would work. I'm sure if the 400 people turned on their mobile broadband here, the network would just die. Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. And there are all sorts of data security problems with what I'm proposing, because a person who's working in an institution, maybe securely on the local network, and they take that computer home, there are real problems as well in terms of data security. But they're going to do it anyway. So we need to find a better way of securing the services. Sorry, and I forgot their first question. Or was it a comment?
What is the EduROM for if we move our A users off that network?
I'm just echo Paul Vince's question. Why is there an NRAM? I mean, we know that we need it now, and it will be needed for the high-end users. And we know that individually the institutions will never have got to the multi-gigabit networks that we have across Europe today if there wasn't a central coordination in the NRANs. So they have a future for a while. I won't go further than that. Okay, thanks.
There's a question at the front.
Mike Norris from HEANet. I'm just wondering about when you say Class A, B, and C. You know, why be classful? Why stop at Class A? Are we really certain about the separate needs of Class B and C users? Because I suspect that many of them are creations of the funding models that are there, which say, for grant purposes, you must buy large computers. Secondly, I believe that over time, many of the applications being used have been packetized, or else the whole service has been packetized, like Amazon Cloud. So I think it might be worth looking at whether these exist or not. We do see peaks in the network, and that is true. There are large amounts of data flowing around, but do they have to flow at such speeds? If they take a few hours to process, it doesn't matter if they take a few hours to get there.
Yeah. I take that as a comment, Mike, rather than a question. But yes, there's no reason to stop at Class A. But by the time we have successfully moved the Class A's, I'm afraid there'll be a Class D will have crept out of the woodwork. I mean, I can't think of outsourcing the LHC in CERN, for instance. 40 gigabits a second. No, it's not. It's going to be a while.
Okay, I see there's one question still at the back, but we're getting very short of time, so can you just keep it brief, please?
My question is also about Class A, B, and C users. If you see that the C users are using a lot of bandwidth, that's fine, but it's the A and B users that are financing the net, not the C users. So I'm just wondering how you would build a campus network, or you will not have a campus network perhaps, because you will pay 250 euros per year for a 3G subscription, and then you don't have 250 euros per year to build a network that the C users are using heavily, but the A and B users are paying for.
There's an assumption there that the Class A users are their only cost is the physical network, is the packets. But in fact, a Class A user, because of their growing mobility, will have an enormous cost in help desk and support that should be eliminated by providing something like a mobile broadband connection. So all of the costs are not in the network. That's a partial answer.
Thank you very much, Michael. We're getting a bit late in our timing, actually, so I'll stop that now. But obviously there's a lot of interest in some of the points that Mike has made. Anyway, we'll move on to our second presentation, which will be by Klaas Wieringa, who I think many of you will know really quite well. He worked in SurfNet, the Dutch research network, for a long time, and About 8 months ago, he moved to work for Cisco in their corporate development department, I think it is. I'm speaking here without my notes, actually. He's going to present also about campus issues, but what he's looking at is issues that are raised by a student population that has grown up in basically the era of ICT. So, Klaas, I'll pass on to you.
Thank you, Dale. Well, to start with, I would like to express that I'm very happy to see so many, or actually not see so many of you, because the lamps are quite strong. But one of the things I was thinking when I sort of sold my soul, I thought nobody will show up in my presentations anymore because they're afraid for a sales pitch. So thank you for this vote of confidence. What I would like to talk about for almost half an hour, if Dale keeps me short, is what sort of a follow-up of what Michael has been talking about. What are the things that are happening in the world? How are they affecting, in my opinion, higher education? And what can you do about that? How can you leverage them for your benefit? So, to start with some general observations. I think the book cover I show here is really a fantastic picture. It was the vision of the 17th, 16th, 15th, 16th century people, the pre-Columbus people that thought that the world was flat, and that because of that, if you would sail far enough, you would drop off the world. I would argue that at the moment the world has become flat, and I follow Thomas Friedman in that, and in the sense that distance is only important if you want to have a conference call or a video conference with people. Then it's still very annoying. We need to do something about that. But apart from that, it doesn't matter where your stuff is. And why doesn't it matter? Because of all these fantastic networks we have been building over the last 30 years or so. And that has some consequences. It means that all of a sudden the bookstore at the corner of your street is not competing with the bookstore one street down. It's competing with Amazon. And that requires rethinking of where you position yourself, the types of service you want to offer, but also, as Michael alluded to before, the types of things you don't want to offer. And I argue that education is very important if you want to maintain or improve your position in this new world. And I really love this picture. It's one of the category lies, damned lies and statistics, but still it allows you to say nice things like people from the Czech Republic are poor but clever, and Norwegians are rich and stupid. But the real reason why I show this picture is that even though statistic is not that strong in this, you might say that there is some kind of correlation between how well people are educated on the vertical axis and how much they on average earn. So as a country, it's important to educate your people because it makes them rich. Another nice thing about that is that, as I was mentioning before, the networks are what makes this world flat. And the good thing is we are all here in a very fortunate situation. This is about broadband subscription figures, and what you see is that in the top 15 it's pretty much all Western European, some Eastern European countries. So generally speaking, the Terina constituency is doing well. They have high bandwidth available, and I think that's very important to become a major player in this new world order. So if I now then move to I wanted to say our constituencies, I should say your constituencies, our customers, then there are some interesting things to be observed. And that is that I can sum it up in one sentence. Students are the first to try out all these new things. And they are hitting your campuses. And that's what you need to have an answer for. They use all the new technologies as first. And if they don't like it, they throw it away. But just look at students and you know what will be the next hot thing. They also have adopted new ways of learning. And again, facilitated by these fantastic networks that we have been building. They don't rely on getting into your class at 9 in the morning and have this professor that would really like to do his research but is forced to teach you a class and so he hands out this thing that he has been using in his education for 10 years or 15 years. No, you can access your educational content whenever, wherever you want, and you sort of become manager of your own education. And that is for some people a very bad thing, because you do need some discipline, but it allows for new possibilities. And you can see that there are many sites out there that offer really fantastic content. Now, unfortunately, the people in the back have not allowed macros to run, so you don't see the nice video that should play now in the bottom right corner. So I will just talk around it a little bit. What the fact that your content can be everywhere also allows for is you don't have to live close to your university anymore. You're going to make it work? Yeah. Still doesn't work. Anyway, so I'll just move on. So new things come into play because of these networks, because of the fact that content can be everywhere, but still sometimes you need to be able to communicate. Actually, I would argue that that is the most important thing of your education, the communication with peers, with professors, etc. And for that, new tools are being developed, like video conferencing, and it promises at least to become nearly as good as being there. Nearly as good, because of course you also want to have that beer after class, and it's just not as good when you have to do that alone. But we're getting there, and there are lots of practical reasons why you're very happy to do just that and forget about having that beer afterwards. Then there is this hugely hyped term Web 2.0, and what is usually the case with the hype is here also, I believe, also the case, and that is that if you look beyond the hype, there is a lot of truth in these new paradigm shifts and all these nice expressions. And what you see is that I don't understand it. Some of these technologies I use myself, but many I don't, and I have no clue what people find so interesting about it. But I don't think that is important, because I'm getting old, so I'm losing touch with that. What is important is just look at the figures, and it's clear that these students, your constituency, and even the ones below that, the younger they get, the more they start using all these new technologies in ways that we have no idea how they use it, but we see they do use it, and what are we going to do about it? A funny thing I noticed when I thought I was talking about distance education and stuff like that, and I thought, let me get some nice logos there. And one of the things that I found quite funny was I thought, oh yeah, I need a nice logo for MIT OpenCourseware. So I did a Google search for MIT and distance learning, and I found this really nice logo, MIT School of Distance Education. And I downloaded it and put it on a slide, and then I thought, but I'm not so sure that this is the logo I had seen before. And in fact, it's not. This is what they call themselves, at least, university in India. And they call themselves MIT, and they offer courses. And this is a wonderful new opportunity for distance education. You don't have to be in Massachusetts to offer your courses to students, and they still think they have a wonderful education. And it might be that this MIT is much better at doing distance education. So it flattens the world again. Well, this was this really cool Cisco telepresence video that you have to look for yourself. You have to come to the Cisco offices nearby to watch it for real. But I just wanted to mention one last thing, and that is a whole new type of things that are coming in the campus networks. And that is the whole idea of integrating all kinds of services into one network. I see there's someone from Delft University of Technology. Wouldn't it be so good if you had some alerts that the building was going on fire a bit earlier, so that you could have done something about it? Just an email, take your equipment and get the fire down. So, to move on, what does that mean for higher education? It means you get a bunch of people in that expect something of you. We can't say anymore, it has to be our type of email address. They come in and say, I don't want a new email address. Everybody knows my address. I want to use it. In terms of identity management that Michael was talking about, they have, at least in a couple of years, they all have a digital identity that they use in their school, and then they move to the university and they just want to use it again. And why would they have to get a new identity? So these are things you have to think about. They will hit you, and you need to have an answer, and you need to be able to merge these new things into your existing process. And I think, as Michael said, very wise, also a way of getting rid of them again when they are beyond their use. And it means you have to really, it has to become a strategic part of your university, how to bring in new technologies and what to do with them and how to get rid of them. And I like this diagram as a simple way of thinking about how this typically works. Typically, it starts with isolated locations at a university where someone picks up a new technology, tries it out on a small scale, see how it works. I have here a couple of examples of that. And then it moves on to a larger scale. It becomes, let's say in the case of wireless, you start with one building, you move to a whole campus, and then finally technology become an integral part of what your university is about. So, what should you do? Well, this new learning environment, it is not that everything is new and all the old technologies are useless. I still like a lot my books, and I really don't think it's as nice as looking at a screen. But on the other hand, the books get old really soon. So you could enhance it with online content that is actual. Or in some cases, you would use only electronic means. So there's all kinds of mixing and matching of different things. But what is very important, I think, is that we have to come off our ivory tower and not expect anymore to be able to tell those technology-savvy people that come in how to do things. It will, to a large extent, be the other way around. They know how they want to use technology, and we have to service them. We are there for them to learn, and they are not there for us to pay our salary. And again, the world is becoming flat, so also in campus, off campus, this distinction becomes less and less relevant. And of course, it is there already. And why is it there already? Because it is not in 5 years using it out. It's a gradual process where new technologies are coming in, moving to maturity, and get moved out. This is the sliding window that Michael was talking about. And it's not so important where exactly in this schema different technologies are, but I think it's good, the thinking is good, that things move from becoming from new to becoming mainstream to become old-fashioned. And so it requires some system thinking about what do we do with it. And how do we do that? Well, of course, there are companies out there in the world that can integrate all these nice technologies, all these different applications by bringing it onto one infrastructure, IP-based, of course. And then you get very complicated systems like this, where all elements fit in. I don't think this is important at all to spend a lot of time on this. The only message I want to bring across, we can build it already. It is there. It is. So if you want to experiment with these things, do it. You need wireless. Wireless is the only technology that most students use. I should have put other 3G and technologies, etc. I have to agree with Michael that that is also an important thing. And what is very important is it's about collaboration. You cannot do everything yourself, so you have to work together. You are competitors in one respect, but you need each other. I think that is what Terina successfully does. What successful NRENs do is bringing together a community that helps each other and that makes the sum larger than the parts. And okay, I will not talk too much about federation, because if you would be interested in it, you would be on the other side of this this complex where they talk the whole session about federations. But this is what you need to do. This is what will make the difference, I believe. Networking is not doesn't make the difference anymore. I can get a gig Ethernet at every street corner almost. So it's about what I, when I was at SurfNet, used to call Club SurfNet. At the idea that we together can make things happen, infrastructural services. And of course, a big step in that was Eduroam. Oh, interesting. Can you restart my presentation? No, it's... Yeah, thank you. And you want to make all that content available on lots of different platforms, because again, it's not just the laptop. Even though it might be this really nice Mac Air, they come in with their phone and they want to be able to access stuff. You need to get into these things, experiment with it, try it out and see what works, see what doesn't work, and probably 90% will not work, but those 10% will make all the difference. Use new technologies, and this is the one thing I'm running a bit out of time, that's why I'm rushing through a little bit, but this is the one thing I want to highly recommend you to go to a session tomorrow at 2 p.m. where someone from Coventry University and one of my colleagues will talk about what I think is a really fantastic way of integrating a virtual world with the real world, where a user can walk into a building with his laptop and his avatar at the same time will arrive in the 3D environment, and he can talk to someone that's on the other side of the world and that walked into this virtual building of the university. And again, I don't know what will happen. I don't know where this will end. I don't know how useful it is, but I believe it is a very interesting experiment at the very least. So, to come to a summary, not really a conclusion, I think it is more about what you should think about, questions to ask yourself. How am I going to deal with these new technologies that come into my university at an incredible rate? How can I make sure that the students that come in are not complaining all the time about the far behind technology that you are offering to them? And how do you remain relevant when they can, instead of going to your professor, they can also just go to MIT and look at the material? Why would they come to you at all if they can find it everywhere? And how do I then, those students that come in with their fresh ideas, with their knowledge of new technologies, how can I make sure that that is facilitated? And very important, I think, one of the main reasons of being for NRENs and universities is that they constantly keep the flow of innovation coming in. So how are you going to support those people that come into your campus and that have revolutionary ideas that you may think are crazy, but that may change the way you do things? Interesting that I get one frame of this video, but anyway, so what I believe you should do is don't think too much about these technologies, whether they are relevant for you, whether they are important for you, whether you see a use. It's so easy to kill all innovation by comparing it to a fully developed system that you have been using for 15 years versus something that is completely new. Just do it. Just try out these things. Throw away what you don't like. Keep what you do like. And encourage students to experiment with these things. Don't say things like, no, we don't like that, or it kills our resources, or no, BitTorrent, no, we don't want that because our bandwidth is limited. Come on, get more bandwidth. This is what it is about, providing them with new uses of your networks. So, that is what I had to say about it. I think to end my presentation, it is really, I think, about anyone, anywhere, on every type of device, and they should be able to access everything. I think that should be the big goal, and every step into that direction, I think, will be a good step. Thank you. I think I can take a couple of questions. Yeah. No questions? Going once? Going twice? Thank you again.
Okay, we'll quickly move on because we are running slightly late. Thank you very much, class, for a very interesting presentation. Our third presenter is Jean-Marc Huzet, who has worked as a consultant for Juniper Networks since 2001, but prior to that he worked for Renater, the French research network. He's going to be talking about the challenges faced by campuses in achieving virtualization. So I'll hand you over to Jean-Marc.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here again to make a presentation, and having the last slot has some disadvantage but also some advantage because I can stand as long as I want, right? As long as you stay, actually. So I'm going to talk about virtualization, but you know, virtualization first is a buzzword in the industry, so it means a lot of things. So what I'm planning to do is first introduce what we mean by virtualization in the research education space, because there are some work going on in this area. So we really focus on what is being developed within the community. And as these projects are essentially focusing on backbones, I want to spend some time with you about thinking how this could be set up in a campus network and how we could actually seamlessly, in a seamless way, integrate the campus and the end user into this new virtualization paradigm. Okay? So, first thing, virtualization, as I said, is a big thing. I mean, we read any paper in the IT sector and we talk about virtualization. And so there are a lot of things behind this concept. We talk about virtual private networks, we talk about computing virtualization, we talk about storage virtualization, and also routing and security virtualization, as the routers and firewalls can be virtualized as well, exactly as an operating system of a node. So many building blocks are available today, and my talk is not about, explaining how all these things work. And the innovation in the RNE space is not directly linked to one of these building blocks. So what is the concept in your community that is currently being explored? It's, okay, let's imagine that we could, in the future, request from not one single infrastructure, but a set of infrastructure or a chain of infrastructure, a certain set of building blocks in order to build our own network that we can use for our own experimentation. So it's about the concept of virtual lab facilities that are given to a certain set of users for specific experiment, where they can first do whatever they want, including some disruptive testing, including testing new protocols that are not available in the market, testing new application, and also they could build an environment for a certain time, but come back later to redo an experiment by using exactly the same environment they had before. So it's about taking a set of virtual elements from different infrastructure, put them together, build your own network, routers, links, firewalls, nodes, and have your own facility that could be at a very large scale. So there are two major project initiatives in Europe that are dealing with this paradigm. One is Manticore, led by HNet, I2CAT, Rediris, Nordunet, and a couple of partners, and we are happy to be involved in it, where here they explore how to produce logical IP networks from a set of physical resources. And I invite you to go to our stand because they brought a demo with the first prototype. So it's the first time they show this prototype in live. So please visit their demo. They are in our stand. The second big initiative is the Federica network you may heard about. There is a poster about this project. And here it's really this concept that is being explored as a full infrastructure at pan-European scale. So in this infrastructure that is, the project just started, so the infrastructure will be in place in a couple of months. Researchers in Europe will be able to request for a certain set of virtual resources, for example, a logical router or a virtual node, and a set of links to connect them in order to do this kind of experimentation of our completely private and virtual network on which they can control all the elements, for example, the routing protocols being used or any characteristic of the infrastructure. So let's assume that these projects work well and that we end someday with a service that is being available to the community. We would have, in that case, typically in a national research network, a physical infrastructure, and on top of this infrastructure, they could instance state a certain set of logical networks. So one would be, of course, the IP network as it exists today, and in parallel, they will provide some virtual instance of the physical resource, or they will provide logical resource that will be controlled directly by the users that require this infrastructure for their experiment. In order to reach the end user, we need in many countries to extend this concept to the regional networks and in the metropolitan networks, if the research lab is not directly connected to the NRN. So they will need to provide exactly the same capabilities. And the things that are explored in the community is to have a kind of service layer based on SOA technology that can coordinate the logical, the virtual resource from different stakeholders so that they can create an instance state on demand, this kind of virtual network from end to end. So we can expect the NRNs being the first to implement this kind of service because they are very close to these pan-European initiatives like Federica, and they are usually the first to implement this kind of new service in the community. Then for the regional network, there are basically two possibilities. One is that they adopt exactly the same mechanism. So in that case, that means they will use the same service layer. So they agree to use the same and with the same capabilities so that they can seamlessly integrate their logical resource with the logical resource of the NRNs. However, you know that it takes a lot of time in order to achieve this end-to-end. And this is all the issue of life cycle of portfolio, how we implement the service in all the domains. So a second solution in order to accelerate the development of this paradigm is to have the regional networks or metropolitan networks providing a very simple service based on Ethernet connectivity in order to extend the virtual network up to the campus just with pure connectivity. Okay, so that could be a way or workaround in order to accelerate the development of this service up to the campus. So in that case, in the second case, of course, the regional networks would not play a role of virtual network stakeholder, but they would play just a role of connectivity to the campus. But let's focus on the campus now, because this is really what I want to explore here today. The campuses are very particular characteristic because they represent the first or the last mile, depending how you look at this, but they connect the user, the endpoint. And they have problems to solve that are much closer to enterprise type of problems, where the NRNs and regional networks are much more like, service providers, so they play a backbone role. And so there are three requirements I would mention here. One is that the campus, they have to deal with many more traffic processing building blocks than the backbones. Basically, in the backbone, you have routers, you have connectivity, but in the campus, you have many more, traffic processing capabilities, such as firewall, intrusion detection prevention systems. You may have remote, VPN, SSL, or IPsec. There are many technologies that are used in campus. And of course, that you have integrated in the model if you implement this virtualization paradigm in the campus. So there is much more integration work probably in the campus. The other thing is that they need to seamlessly integrate their virtualization service with the one provided with the NRNs. And of course, we could say, let's ask the campus to use the service layer that is being used in the national network. But you know that it's a very task to do it. Because they use different tools in the campus, they also have different operational processes. So probably they will use their own tools. Typically, they use access control technology, and maybe we can match this kind of tools with the tools that are being used in the national network. So that's the kind of thing I want to explore today. And the last requirement I want to mention here, it was in the Earnest report that was mentioned before, is that because, of all the traffic processing building blocks they have to manage in the campus, there is always a risk for a campus to become the bottleneck in terms of performance or services. So they have to manage, this, and this is really a requirement. If they deploy something, it has to be completely transparent to the service, and it should not break the performance that is expected by the users. So let's assume that we have a nice campus now. We have a user here, Einstein somewhere here, who want to use a virtual network for a specific experiment. And the question is, the user is people like you, like me. We have a computer, a desktop, maybe a laptop, maybe other kind of device. And we are in the campus. We want to connect to the network. And today we connect to the IP network, right? So I would like to move from the traditional IP network to the special virtual network in order to do my experiment. Because this virtual network is connected to the large-scale laboratory facility that is provided by the NRNs. So how do I do this? There are two aspects we will explore now. One is the service layer. How, or what is the service plane we are going to use? What tool are we going to use to move the user from one network to the other? Are we using the NRN tool that is translated for campus environment, or are we going to use what the campus is using today? And I'm thinking about access control technology in order to do that. And the second aspect we are going to look at also is at the data plane. What are we going to use as a technology to do this virtualization? And obviously what comes to my mind here is to use just Ethernet VLANs in order to split and separate the users. Although you may use more sophisticated technology, but VLAN is something that is cheap there already. There are other possibilities to do this at layer 3, and we also are going to look at this. So let's focus first on the service plane, and how do I connect to the specific virtual network, which is here, compared to the global IP network, which is here. So there are two options using access control technology. The first option is to use it at layer 2 mode. In that case, we typically use 802.1x, which is a standard, in order to authenticate the user, but also check the host if it's compliant with some policies. And based on the profile of the user, then we connect the user to the right network. So this is typically what is done today in order to access the IP network. So we can use exactly the same mechanism in order to connect the user not to the IP network, but to the virtual network he needs to access to. And of course, the question here is, how do I move from one network to another? And this is something we are going to look after. This question now is about the data plane. So if we assume that the VLAN is good enough to separate the users, how do we manage security in that context? Because probably the VLAN that is being used for the IP network is a VLAN that is protected by all the security defense that is in place done by the administrator of the campus. So it's probably a safer environment than the VLAN that is being used to access to the virtual network, because in that case it's probably going to be just a VLAN connected to the wide area laboratory facility. And some people believe that this VLAN is safer because it's a closed environment between a group of friends. But you know that, the best viruses come from friends. So I believe that it's not good enough to think that we are in a closed environment and that this is going to be an issue in the campus. We already had this debate with this light path service. So this is not a new issue I'm bringing here. But with the virtualization paradigm, we are going to have this problem to deal with. So I would propose two solutions in order to solve that. The first solution is to have more sophisticated capabilities in the switch if you work in layer 2 mode, so that the 802.1x not only connect the user to the specific VLAN, but also apply some specific policies in the switch so that you control the traffic. Maybe you police and you say, okay, it's going to use only this kind of protocol, or maybe you are going to do more sophisticated traffic analysis if it's available in the switch, and of course if the access control controller has the capability to deal with these policies. Another solution is to use, and I realize that one slide is missing, but anyway, there is another possibility, is to use the, no, sorry, I just was confused. I'll come back to my point. So the second solution here would be, okay, let's assume the switch is not really good in security, which, I mean, this is not his first job. So if we could use and leverage the virtualization technique that is available in some firewalls, then we could have a dedicated firewall for a specific research project that could be managed by the user itself. So without huge investment, just using the same equipment, you could have one firewall, virtual firewall, being used for the IP network, and then X instances of dedicated virtual firewall for each group of users for a specific virtual laboratory facility. Okay, so that's probably better in the sense that you have very sophisticated firewall mechanism in place, and also you can outsource, not outsource, but give the management and the control of this firewall to the community that is using these virtual lab facilities, which is one of the key points in the virtualization paradigm. That was the option one. We went in details, using layer 2 with access control. The option 2 is using layer 3, so access control, but with layer 3 mode. Good water, by the way. So in layer 3 mode, the difference is, I mean, the mechanism is very similar. You authenticate to the controller, but the controller doesn't talk to a switch or access point, wireless access point. It's going to talk to a layer 3 device like a firewall. And so all the policies are going to be applied in the firewall, where you have, of course, a finer granularity in terms of policies you want to implement. So using the same mechanism, the user can access to layer 3 network or to a virtual network, and we use the sophisticated firewall policies in order to handle this traffic in a proper way. And also here, one interesting thing is that you can also secure the communication between the host and the firewall by using an automatic IPsec tunnel, which may be interesting if the user here is using on some sensitive project, for example, with medical data, also some information that cannot be given to anybody else. Then we could have here a secured channel automatically set up with IPsec up to the firewall. So here, if we are using a wireless network, for example, or an unsafe environment, we are protecting the information. The last point here in my scenario I want to mention, which is the point I raised before, is how I am going to manage the user so that he can move from one network to another network in a very easy way. So I'm proposing you 3 solutions, and the last will be my preferred. One is just a manual login. You propose 2, for example, 2 portals, one for the IP network, one for the logical virtual network, 2 different authentication, and of course, if the user wants to move from one network to another, it just changes the network. It's not a very transparent process for the user. Another possibility is very transparent. You can ask the controller to check if there is a specific application running in the host. So, for example, if the researcher want to jump to the research platform, he just launch a specific application corresponding to the experiment, then the access control will check and see that the host status has changed with this new application, and we move the host from the VLAN 1 to VLAN 3. It's very transparent for the user, but maybe too much, because in that case he may just run the application without really wanting to move from one network to another. So it may be, you may have undesirable effect in this. The last one is my preferred one, because in that case it's similar to option 2, but the difference is that you use a USB key, so like that, on which you have an encrypted certificate corresponding to the research project of this virtual platform. If you insert the USB stick in your PC, the access control will detect that there is something new in the host, which is this certificate, and so we'll understand that the user who has done a physical something physical, want to move from the VLAN of the IP network to the VLAN of the lab experimentation. Okay? So that's probably the best solution from my point of view. So, couple of minutes to finish. Oh, 5 minutes. Oh, okay, I can slow down then. So let's do a break. So I really wanted to explore as much scenario I could imagine, but there are probably other, and I really encourage you to think about it and discuss this with us. To finish, I just want to give an overview of the different building blocks and see some interesting in this virtualization paradigm. I classify them by endpoint, connectivity, traffic processing, and the service plane. And for the campus, the one that looks very interesting here are of course, the virtual nodes, the Ethernet VLANs as a transport technology looks the best and easy to use. Logical routers and firewall virtual system. I think there is there are very interesting building blocks for this paradigm. I noted also VPN SSL because it's also a technology that can be virtualized. However, we may think about how to use it really as a second step. And for the service plane, definitely I believe that the network access control technology using a standardized approach is the most interesting and probably much easier to use in the context of a campus than using the tool that is going to be designed for the NRNs. As far as Juniper is concerned, we are quite a lot involved in virtualization. So, of course, we have a solution for access control following the standard defined by TCG TNC. And there will be a keynote talking about this tomorrow morning. We are also involved in the infrastructure with the MPLS VPNs, the switching area, and, of course, because here we are going to use VLANs, and we can also control with the controller some sophisticated policies for the VLANs, like traffic filtering, which was one of the options I mentioned. But we also support virtual firewall systems, as well as for VPN SSL. And of course, last but not the least, the logical router capabilities, which are demonstrated with the Manticore project in our stand all the week. So that's what I wanted to share with you. In conclusion, this is a very interesting paradigm. I'm not sure exactly what will be the business case at the end and how you are going to use it, but just this concept of being able to instance state a complete virtual lab facilities across multiple domains by having the community offering some physical resource that can be sliced in logical resource. I think it's a very interesting concept, and it's definitely being explored not only in Europe but also in the US and probably in other places. Practically, I think that if the NRNs are the first to implement this kind of new services for the regional networks, either they just follow the trends and they implement similar service, or they can have a very light, pure connectivity service in place like VPLS for Ethernet service in order to just connect the campus to the NRN virtual facilities. And for the campus, the two key things I explored today with you, and one is the access control that can be used not only to control the access to the IP network, but also to control the access to these virtual facilities and handle the switchover in a very flexible way. But whatever, I mean, the solution will be, I think it's the right time now for the campuses to get involved in this paradigm, because sometimes for some services we focus so much in backbones that at the end it's very difficult, I mean, practically to implement in the campus because they were not involved from day one. So that's really my message here at Terrana is please get involved in this paradigm, which is very exciting. And I will be more than happy to have a discussion with you this week. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jean-Marc. Are there any questions? There's one at the front here.
Yes. I think class has a question about the water.
It's lovely water. That's something you really can do well. Couldn't resist. Now, Jean-Marc...
I have a couple of these, but later.
You were talking about the assignment of roles, and you mentioned 3 ways of doing it. First one being username, password, and then for different roles, different username, passwords, or your preferred method, a USB stick, which is essentially, I would guess, also a different identity, and based on the type of identity you want to use, you use a different stick, or?
That's a good question. Actually, I'm not sure. We wouldn't need to dig in details, but either it's a certificate that is being used to authenticate a user. In that case, yes, it's a different identity, you're right. Or maybe, but I haven't checked that in details. I mean, these are more work being done on a table. I have not done practical yet, but I try to take the existing building blocks so that we can start experimentation. So maybe we can just ask the host controller, so the controller, to check if there is a specific certificate, so not part of the authentication, and that's what I had in mind, not part of the authentication, which was done already, because I assume the user already authenticates himself to access the IP network, but I want to move the virtual network, so I insert the key, so I expect the host checker to check what is going on in my host and check that this certificate exists, as we would check if an application has the right antivirus version or the right process running in the host. So that's what I have in mind. Okay?
I would say it's sort of like a control plane issue, and I'm then wondering why not use the authentication and authorization systems that are out there and have one user having many roles, and you could even assume that the user could select the role as well. So you could say, I'm Jean-Marc, and at the moment I am Einstein, my Einstein role, please do this.
That's a possibility. I wanted to avoid having some interaction through a portal, but that come back to the first solution, which is feasible. However, as you mentioned, the authentication plane, I want to mention something is because you mentioned eduroam, which is a key, middleware in the community, which from my point of view here sits on top of the model. Okay, so I'm talking about something that is happening locally, but this controller can be plugged to any Radius server and middleware. So I would see something like eduroam on top of it, connected to the local access controller, using all the profiles from these users, so we connect to the whole planet, more or less, and we can use these users, description for the local access control. Okay, any other question? There is no speaker after, so. But maybe you're thirsty. So thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so that ends the session. Thank you very much, and we'll see you all this evening at the opening reception. Thanks.